President Trump allegedly made some denigrating comments towards our service members back in 2018, at least according to some anonymous sources speaking to The Atlantic. So there's a lot of controversy about this, whether or not he actually did say these things. But before I get into that, let's kind of dive into what he allegedly said. So now, again, The Atlantic, um, let's see. In The Atlantic, it was written that President Trump had referred to dead American soldiers as losers and suckers after canceling a trip to a World War I cemetery. So now Trump allegedly rejected the idea of a visit to the American cemetery near Paris in 2018 because he feared that his hair would become disheveled by the rain, and because he did not believe that it was important to honor American war dead, according to four people with knowledge of the discussion that day. And again, all of these people are anonymous, so take that into consideration, whether or not you trust that. Again, you could say, "Oh, it's Trump derangement syndrome." He didn't actually say that. Look, the White House is already pushing back on this very heavily, but nonetheless, as I'm going to explain, this kind of tracks, at least in my opinion, for what I've seen from the president. So let's dive into it. Now, it was written that in a conversation with senior staff members on the morning of the scheduled visit, Trump said, quote, allegedly, "Why should I go to that cemetery? It's filled with losers." In a separate conversation in the same trip, Trump allegedly referred to the more than 1,800 Marines who lost their lives at Belleau Wood as, quote, suckers for getting killed. So losers and suckers. Okay. So if this is to be correct, then fighting to die in a war for America, for the country, I guess makes you a sucker in the eyes of Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump, and just to kind of go, into why I believe that this tracks and that it is something that he either might have said or at least maybe thinks. And again, a lot of this is guesswork, but from, what we've read and what we've seen, what we've heard of Donald Trump, wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility. Look, this is somebody who had many deferments from Vietnam, including one for alleged bone spurs. And so it seems like somebody who's trying desperately to stay out of, like to not put his body on the line, so to speak, right? In war, trying everything, in order to get out of it, not because he was a conscientious objector, but, like unlike Muhammad Ali, who actually went to prison for his beliefs, Donald Trump got many deferments. I'm pretty sure his father intervened on his behalf to prevent his idiot son from being killed in the war. Because, like, Donald Trump, that's like the first guy to get mowed down, honestly. But okay, so there's that, right? So again, I think that it probably is true that he would think that somebody like that would think soldiers were suckers. Because again, this is a person that we've shown over and over again to be out for themselves. So now let me give you some history on this. Okay. Now Belleau Wood was a consequential battle in American history, and on the ground which it was fought is venerated by the Marine Corps. America and its allies had stopped the German advance towards Paris in the spring of 1918. That, of course, is one of the major ways that they stopped Germany from winning that war. Now, also interesting that it kind of, Germany's lost obviously set the stage for World War II because you had the Treaty of Versailles that was incredibly harsh. It was so harsh it wrecked the German economy and allowed for the rise of the fascist Nazi party to take over. I find that very interesting. I like to study the history. I like to look at the history of this stuff, especially when it came to the world wars. But Donald Trump's got a different take because he's shown in many respects that he doesn't care about the history of what happened. In fact, allegedly, Trump had asked, who were the good guys? In World War I, who were the good guys? That is a very curious question. I mean, look, you know, America was on the side of the Allies, if that's what you're wondering. And look, as far as World War One is concerned, it was a complicated war. Let's just say that, right? Because you had all these old political alliances between all these different countries, and it was described in the years leading up to the war as essentially a powder keg, right? Where any one thing could set it off, and what set it off, of course, was the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand. And so, look, again, super complicated, right? That would be far beyond the comprehension of Donald Trump, who does not care. So he said he didn't understand, by the way, why America would intervene on the side of the Allied powers, right, in this war. And so, of course, that's allegedly not the only thing that Donald Trump didn't understand about this. According to their sources here, with knowledge of the president's views, he seemed to generally not understand why Americans would treat former prisoners of war with respect. So, prisoners of war, I mean, look, you guys know I'm not a fan of John McCain, right? The late John McCain. But you got to give him some credit. He got captured, right? And that already Donald Trump has openly said that makes you a loser. I prefer people that don't get captured in war. That's what he said. And again, that's what lends credence to these allegations, right? Because he had absolutely no respect for John McCain or anything. Now, I also have little respect for John McCain. But the one thing that I can point to, like, that's kind of ballsy, is that he had the option, since he was pretty high ranking and had connections, to walk away from the prison camp that he was being held in. He's like, nah, either you let me and my boys go, or I'm just going to stay. And so they said, well, we're not going to let anybody else go. We're just going to let you go. He said, no, I'll stay. Because unless you're letting my soldiers go, I'm not going to go. So that, look, as much as I didn't like John McCain while he was alive, that's like a little bit of respect there, because at least you seem to have cared about the people that were under your command, that you were your fellow soldiers, right? And so, yeah, I have some respect for that. And you can disagree with that, and that's fine, right? I just personally think that that's kind of badass. But anyway, he also apparently doesn't understand why pilots who were shot down in combat are also honored by the military. And on at least 2 occasions since becoming president, according to 3 sources with direct knowledge of his views, Trump referred to former President George H.W. Bush as, quote, a loser for being shot down by the Japanese as a Navy pilot in World War II. Bush had escaped capture in that point, but 8 other men shot down during the same mission were caught, tortured, and executed by Japanese soldiers, which George H.W. Bush could have ended up being one of those people. So there's more. Now, on Memorial Day 2017, Trump allegedly, while visiting Arlington National Cemetery with John Kelly, according to sources with knowledge of the visit, Trump turned, and this is why, this is all while standing by Robert Kelly's grave, right? Turned directly to him, to John Kelly, and said, I don't get it. What was in it for them? What was in it for them? And so, look, understand, everything that I know about Donald Trump is that he is deeply transactional, right? Is that he doesn't see the value in anything that does not benefit a person directly. So, like, if I'm not getting anything out of it, and that's, of course, a polite way of saying that he's an incredibly selfish person. Okay? An incredibly selfish person. To say, well, what's in it for them? I mean, what a bunch of dopes. What a bunch of dopes and losers. God, suckers. I mean, why would you get yourself killed for your country? It doesn't make any sense to me. That's what he's allegedly saying. That's allegedly what he's saying. Okay? And this entire thing, by the way, is written by Jeffrey Goldberg, which, again, there's been some critics on the left that have said, look, I'm dubious about about the veracity of these claims, of these quotes, since they are not sourced, right? They are anonymous quotes from military officials, I would prefer alleged military officials. I would prefer that these sources make at least one or two of them come out to corroborate. But again, even without that, I'm more tending, like I tend to believe them over anything else because of the fact that we have already seen Trump's behavior towards military families, Gold Star families, towards again the cons, people like John McCain, even who I have massive problems and disagreements with, but nonetheless, you know, loser, sad baby, to these military families, and so I don't think he gives a damn about people in the military. And so that kind of does lend a little bit of credence to at least this kind of attitude, whether or not he actually literally said it. I think it's obvious that he has disdain or to certain people, obviously who go against him, right? Who disagree with him that happen to be in the military, as well as, of course, people who, I mean, tend to do things that don't benefit themselves. As the kind of person that Donald Trump is, he doesn't see the value in serving a greater power. That's why I really doubt that he's a religious person. And I doubt, and I very much, again, put stock into this, at least having this kind of mindset towards military members and veterans and things like that. So, again, that's where I come from, and I could be wrong. And there are legitimate questions about the veracity of this stuff, but I'm going to err on the side of I think that this is probably true, whether or not we could prove it or not. So, with that said, Goldberg writes, quote, he can't fathom the idea of doing something for someone other than himself, one of Kelly's friends told Atlantic columnist Jeffrey Goldberg. He just thinks that everyone who does anything when there's no direct personal gain to be had is a sucker. There's no money in serving the nation, Kelly's friend went on to allegedly say. Trump can't imagine anyone else's pain. That's why he would say to the father of a fallen Marine on Memorial Day in the cemetery where he was buried. That's why he would say that. So, look, that's really the trait of a sociopath. Like it makes Trump sound like a sociopath, right? Which again, wouldn't it all surprise me if it were true? But here's another thing. I'm going to go off on just a little bit of a tangent here for just a second. This is kind of why I'm against American imperialism. Okay. So look, I think that our government right now uses military men and women to serve the corporate military industrial complex, while grossly, of course, underpaying, undercompensating, and not taking care of our people that are out fighting or that come back as veterans. There are huge issues with the way that we treat veterans in this country, especially Republicans, right? So Republicans tend to use veterans as props and then don't go out of their way to make sure that they have adequate health care, housing, funding, mental health care, for PTSD, all that stuff. So, and Republicans are really bad at it, and Democrats aren't great either, but are far better, of course, than Republicans on the issue of veterans. It seems like both parties really tend to just want to shovel more money towards defense contractors. And so that's a bit of a problem. And again, that's part of the American imperialism. But understand that also, I think for a lot of people that sign up to serve, they're getting exploited by the military industrial complex. I mean, it's kind of sickening that you have video games, and video game companies that are pushing recruitment for the military to COD kids playing Call of Duty. Okay, so that's a problem for me, right? And I think a lot of that, again, to going with that exploitation here, so you got a lot of poor kids coming out of high school that see the military or convinced by the military that it's a way to get themselves out of poverty and get an education. And so that's a problem. Maybe we should, instead of pushing people into exploitation by the military industrial complex, fund free college for everybody and make sure everybody gets a living wage. That's just my perspective on this, right? Uh, and understand that it's not the same for every person. And I'm not saying the military is exploiting everybody. I mean, for example, there's people like Pat Tillman, who, by the way, I just said that they're not exploiting everybody, but that's kind of a poor example because the military actually also is exploiting Pat Tillman. But Tillman, understand, like this story is also pretty complicated when it comes to Tillman. But he gave up a multi-million-dollar sports contract in this career, right, to serve in the military. So now he was like, no, I'm going to serve something bigger. I'm going to serve my country. I love America. I love the opportunity I've been given. So I'm going to go and I'm going to sign up to serve my country. Later on, he finds out, oh my God, that was a mistake. So there's a great article in The Intercept, right, that kind of pointed out why he started speaking out even while he was in the service. Quote, shortly after arriving in the country, Tillman confided in his brother and their friend Ross O'Bear that he thought that the invasion of occupation of Iraq were, quote, fucking illegal. Pat Tillman, hero. Pat Tillman died from friendly fire after speaking out against the occupation of Iraq. And at the same time, going back to the exploitation angle, right? The military uses Pat Tillman and his image as like, this is why you should sign up to go bomb brown people overseas. Look, he died in a country that didn't attack us. The wars in Iraq and Afghanistan were monumental mistakes, as was the war in Vietnam. A lot of these wars are illegal and terrible and part of this, Western imperialism, right? And so Tillman's story is absolutely devastating and is an example, by the way, of how conservatives tend to use and abandon the people who do literally go into the military with the best of intentions to try to serve this country. And so those are the people I do respect. But at the same time, it's like, no, don't do it. Don't do it, because you're not serving who you think you're going to serve. Like, you're going to end up serving the CEO of ExxonMobil more than you are the freedoms of fellow Americans. And so, but anyway, maybe in context, Trump might have a point. I never thought I'd say that. But obviously, look, when you look at how he arrives at those points, it's through selfishness and sociopathy and not like a general caring about the troops. And so understand that too. And so those those numerous generals, by the way, according to Goldberg, were asked by him over the past year for their analysis of Trump's, quote, seeming contempt for military service. So understand too that this is a piece that has a perspective that is very anti-Trump from Goldberg. So understand that perspective, it's not like trying to be neutral. It sounds a bit like an op-ed, to be honest with you, and it might just be. Okay. Nonetheless, again, I do think, and I'm going to keep repeating myself, that there is definite basis for these comments to be true. Now, some of his cynicism, they say, is that Trump, unlike previous presidents, tends to believe that the military, like other departments of the federal government, is beholden only to him and not the Constitution. Again, we can back that up by Donald Trump allegedly asking different heads of different departments if they were loyal to him. And of course, you look at the actions by William Barr when it comes to, as well, being a loyal person versus Jeff Sessions, who Trump had, basically decided was disloyal because he wouldn't recuse himself during the Mueller investigation. And so I think that tracks as well. Now, the other thing about that, of course, is that if you're expecting the military to be loyal to you and not to the Constitution, that seems rather authoritarian and fascistic, Okay. Now, another explanation they say is that the president believes that nothing is worth doing without the promise of monetary payback, and that talented people who don't pursue riches are quote unquote losers. Now, Goldberg also cites eyewitnesses that after a White House briefing given by then chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Joe Dunford, that Trump had turned to aides and said, "That guy is smart. Why did he join the military?" Basically implying that if you join the military, you're stupid. Quote, one officer with firsthand knowledge of Trump's views also said that, quote, he also doesn't see the heroism in fighting. Now, for me, I do see that, right? Again, I'm anti-war. I'm a pacifist, but I can see that, like, hey, if our country's attacked, then of course you put everything on the line. And again, I have all respect towards the people who enlist, right? Who say, yeah, I want to protect the country. Again, I think that right now you're not doing so because really what you're doing is putting forward the and I should say it comes from the top really because of the military industrial complex, putting forward the interests of oil companies and the military industrial complex, the defense contractors first. But again, like I have respect for people who would put their lives on the line because they believe in this country. They believe that they're serving America. And I, again, going back to Pat Tillman, huge respect for him, right? And so I think that is heroism. But at the same time, Donald Trump doesn't see it that way. He thinks that people who do that are dopes and losers. And so going by all of this, again, assuming that it's true, I think that, if monetary gain is your first and foremost goal, as it seems to be, well, then I'm afraid that if somebody paid him enough, I don't know. I don't know if I could trust Donald Trump to not betray the country itself. And that seems a bit like maybe the logical conclusion that the Goldberg wants us to get to. Maybe that was meant that way for us to arrive at that, or maybe not. But I got there, and it's like that realization of, do we have a president who would sell us out? I don't know. But it is scary to think about that we've had 4 years of this guy and could have a potential for more.